Welcome back to the Rollup. Today we have a video with the Forma team, which is the first sovereign rollup on Celestia. We talk about the on-chain culture that Celestia is growing with their upcoming Modularium, as well as being the first sovereign rollup on Celestia, what this means for Forma, why they are using TIA as the gas token, and what this idea of on-chain curation, dynamic NFTs, and this growth of an on-chain culture means for the broader Celestia ecosystem. As you know, we are big-time modularity enthusiasts, and this idea of building out sovereign rollups is the next step in Celestia endgame. Hope you guys enjoy, and let's dive right in after a quick word from some of our lovely sponsors.
Cartesi is your home for app-specific rollups. At the forefront of developing new tools and platforms that enhance the capabilities of blockchain technology, Cartesi enables applications that are flexible and built to scale. Build on a full Linux environment and use traditional software libraries, but in blockchain development. Go to cartesi.io, that's cartesi.io, to learn more about building your own app chain today.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Rollup. Today we have another conversation focused on the burgeoning world of modularity, this time with our friends from Forma and Celestia, talking about their sovereign rollup for on-chain creations and kind of this emerging sector of art and on-chain creativity using Celestia and built on sovereign rollups, of course, with Rob. How you doing, bud?
Oh, man, welcome back. In action, and it's another beautiful day in Florida, so happy to be talking about Forma and sovereign rollups. Pretty excited about this one because there's been a lot of research that we've done into Celestia and DA in general, and so this one is going to be very modular, and very stoked to hear from the guys here about their sovereign rollup and everything that's going to happen above the infrastructure. So I'll pass it along to Achilles, let him introduce himself, and then we'll get into Forma.
Hey guys, great to meet you. I'm Achilles. I lead NFT at gaming at Celestia Labs, so responsible for overseeing the growing vertical of, I guess you could call it like consumer crypto, but also sort of creativity and novel uses of block space for brand new experiments around art and gaming.
Beautiful. Welcome in. Frank and Code Crafting, welcome as well, the creators of Forma.
Hey, thank you. I'll go and jump in there. So I'm Frank Kirk, co-founder of Forma. My background is really in product design and management. Believe it or not, I was actually previously Air Force for 9 years of my life. My focus was like on RF transmissions and cybersecurity. Grabbed a bachelor's in cybersecurity while I was in. And then was dabbling in crypto since 2015. Ran into Josh on the Tezos scene in like 2021. And we've been together ever since, building products from DeFi platforms to NFT, fractional NFT ownership to helping a bunch of PFPs launch some of their initiatives. So, and I'm happy to take it to the next step with Forma.
Hey guys, I'm Josh, better known as Code Crafting, co-founder of Forma. I've been a long-time developer, over 20 years experience. And before starting Forma, I was DApp in smart contract dev in Tezos for a few years, and did a bunch of art stuff over there, and now we're building the modular future over here with Forma.
Love it. Love it. Before we jump into Forma, guys, would love to learn a bit more, and I think our community is going to be new to this term of sovereign rollups. It's something that Celestia has kind of been almost had in its back pocket, where a lot of people know Celestia for kind of being this DA layer that scales rollups, cheaper fees. But now we're kind of evolving Celestia into an ecosystem of sovereign rollups. So would anybody like to take a stab at kind of what is the difference between a sovereign rollup and a rollup as we know it, and perhaps some of the pros and cons associated with a sovereign rollup?
Yeah, I can take that. So sovereign rollup is basically a rollup that is not tied to any one ecosystem. Basically, its only liability would be to a DA layer. So in the case of Celestia, the Celestia DA layer, right? It doesn't like settle back to an L1, which is what most L2s do. So in that sense, it's kind of like its own settlement layer. Whereas most of the rollups that we've seen to date are L2 rollups that settle back to an L1.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, it seems simple enough. And so you guys chose to do this design for Forma because you guys wanted to kind of have this technical architecture that allows you to, have this sovereignty and kind of have this choice. But kind of what else inspired you guys to create Forma? Frank, you're from the deep South, man. I love your accent. I mean, I spent some time down there in the South. What got you into Forma, and kind of why are you excited about on-chain creations?
It's funny that you recognize my accent. I don't really hear that much, and I guess it's because I've been all over the world, and down here people have a lot stronger accents, so they don't really ever call that out. So it's been very. It was funny that you did call it out. Now I'm being conscious of it the whole time. But anyways, what got me into Forma was honestly working with Josh. Josh has had a lot of ideas about on-chain creations and how do we bring metadata on-chain, and talking to him and listening to the opportunities there. And then there's also the world of modular and what we can do there to make transactions faster, and cheaper for users. And to be dead honest with you, it was Josh. Josh has been the brainchild behind this, and he's been very, very, very into building this out. And I think he could probably touch on that a little bit more.
Yeah, Josh, I'm also curious, kind of like what you described as settling, like kind of like its own settlement layer. I'm curious, like how does that differentiate from something like a traditional rollup that settles on an L1? You know, in this case, Celestia is underneath. Is it not as simple as like this sovereign rollup settling to Celestia, or what else is happening for this rollup to be a sovereign rollup?
Yeah. First, let me touch like some on like inspiring like the creation of like Forma. So like I've worked for like a lot of years with like artists and stuff, and I've always like tried to push the envelope of like what's possible with NFTs. And a lot of times like they'll ask me, an artist will ask me if like something's possible, and like we do it, and they're just like, oh wow, I didn't realize you could do that. So like what we're trying to do with Forma is like think about, like in the future, like what's going to be here in the future. Like we have these like cultural wonders, right? Like the Colosseum, the pyramids and stuff, and like what kind of infrastructure is it going to take, for these like on-chain creations to like still be here in 100 years or 1,000 years, or like whatever the amount of time is. And so we're really like building the infrastructure for that to like be the case, that like Forma is where that can happen. We can have like these on-chain creations that are like these like wonders that like inspire in people and like create awe when people see them.
Gotcha. And then, so you've got this idea of Forma. You want to make this network of on-chain creations, and you've gone and built out a sovereign rollup, which is now coming to market for this broader use case of kind of art for on-chain creations. And from my perspective, it kind of seems like there's potentially unlimited possibilities. You guys also have worked deep in the tech on kind of some of these innovations and different things that have allowed you to create this sovereign rollup. So Josh, perhaps we can get a bit deeper there. I know Rob was a bit curious on the sovereign rollup side. And so maybe we can touch about the design of Forma. Why don't we start broad and kind of get into the nitty gritty of the technicals as we see fit?
Yeah, sure. So from a high level, Forma is an EVM chain, right? We started with a fork of Geth, but we've made like changes to it. So like we just didn't like copy Geth. Like we have made changes to it that are like fundamental for like these on-chain creations that make them possible to do and make them easier to do. Beyond that, like we're using Celestia for DA, and then we're using Astria for the sequencing layer. So that we can focus on like a custom execution environment basically, without like sacrificing any of the other parts of the stack, right? Because for these pieces to have longevity, to persist, to be sovereign, to be verifiable and trustworthy and stuff, like like every part of the stack like has to be that. Like we can't like compromise and have a centralized sequencer. We can't just like not have DA. So we've made very careful decisions like at each piece of the stack to ensure that we get all these things. And like kind of this is like kind of the first time like this stuff is like possible. Like all the pieces are kind of coming together now. Like with all the modular stuff, we can make sure each piece in our modular stack is the ideal solution and the one that we see best fits for this type of creation.
Cool. Anything to add there, Achilles or Frank?
Well, I feel like so far the notion of on-chain creativity as a separate category has been very much a way of attempting to like retrofit sort of notions that we have about what digital art is or sort of creativity is into the constraints of typical execution environments as they through the sort of Ethereum 2017 to 2019 early CryptoPunks, etc., and PFP collections, which is obviously an interesting and exciting first step. But I think we're so far away from untapping the potential of what it means to have persistent, durable, dynamic objects that are like, sort of permissionlessly composable and all of these like cool things. And so the way to do that is to create space, like block space that's bespokely created for these kinds of experiments, right? And I think Forma marks, a substantial difference there because it's not, there have been experiments around creating L2s or L3s, which are like geared towards NFTs, but they were never created from the ground up with this notion of persistence, which is like what will be around 1,000 years. Because the moment where you lose persistence, you lose the value of like art as well, right? Because these are things that are supposed to be, in some ways, like sort of, you have to know that they will exist if an IPFS link goes down, right? Or you have to know that they will exist if some centralized component goes down. So obviously, there's still a lot of work to be done to fully make it durable. But I think Forma's design and the notion of sort of having custom execution environments with custom precompiles on a decentralized sequencer layer, all of these things are just necessary components to unlock the next phase of creativity, which is like this notion of on-chain creations that are like can reference each other natively, permissionlessly, as well as exist for a very long time. And so I think that Forma brings this to the table, and I'm really excited to see what artists and creators will do with these new tools in their hands.
Yeah, if you could help to like kind of inspire like some of the people that are listening, builders, developers, as far as what is now possible on Forma with the durability in mind, the decentralization in mind, like what is possible on Forma for some of these creators that previously on general purpose L2s and L1s was not previously possible.
So the first thing that we're generally seeing, in the sort of crypto art space, as well as interesting in the gaming and autonomous world space, is like the slow creation of like this, things that are sort of objective in some respects, right? Like no one has to be there to take care of them, right? They're autonomous, like they're like digital golems, where they're like doing their own thing, and they are autonomously evolving or sort of moving forward. The bottleneck with doing this properly, in my opinion, is the fact that you rely on a suite of off-chain solutions, either for hosting some of these things, for some of the rule sets, right? For some of the, particularly the metadata, which is the first thing that Forma is tackling, which sort of compromises and undermines the durability of these things, as well as their sort of composability, right? So the idea is that the deeper down the stack you enshrine some of these rules, which is by having a bespoke execution environment in this case, firstly, the more likely it is that people will actually, use the tooling. And secondly, it means that they can natively do so without relying on sort of ad hoc solutions at all. So one clear use case of having, in this case, fully on-chain metadata and what Forma is like aiming for, especially with some of the early roster of artists we're talking with, is the ability to reference other pieces in a native way, in a super seamless manner, right? So you create a set of custom rule sets, such that your art piece or your artwork can sort of influence or be influenced by other art pieces or artworks or on-chain creations on the chain itself. So what this allows for is and that's something that Josh tweeted about, is the eventual sort of, think of it as like a ever-evolving on-chain performance art, where you keep on adding pieces to a puzzle, that keep on reference on there and like sort of be affected by each other. So for example, I'm gonna create something that as an input maybe has a burn mechanism that like, you have to burn one of Andy's pieces and then you get a special trait in my piece, right? And then maybe eventually someone can create a set of rules where, my piece can evolve if, Robbie does something to his piece or whatever it might be. And given all of these things are on chain, right? It means that we don't trust one single sort of source to tell us what these rules are, or to rely to sort of create the sort of tools for them to sort of unfold. So it's all happening, in a sort of trustless and permission way, on baked into the sort of very backbone of the chain itself. And for me, that's the really exciting thing. I worked at Async Art for a few years, which was an early Ethereum application about dynamic and sort of interactive art. And the biggest issue we found was that we had to keep on creating smart contracts and off-chain solutions that were so ad hoc and like a weird conglomeration of different pieces that eventually collapsed under its own weight in some ways, because there was not native to the execution environment itself for these things to evolve this way. So by baking it in, you're sort of signaling to everyone, and you're making it very easy for everyone to actually create interactive and composable art. And that's why we're sort of calling it modular art as well in some ways, because it's like one thing can refer to another thing, and they can all be building pieces to a third thing, right? So for me, it's around distribution mechanisms and sort of dynamic mechanisms that leverage the on-chain storage of the rules themselves and the metadata itself. And that's really exciting, and it requires a sovereign and bespoke execution environment for the case. You can't really do it very easily, right, on sort of a general purpose chain.
Yeah, dynamic NFTs powered by on-chain metadata. We were talking about this with Zucky and Nick and a couple of other guys about sloths and the Celestine sloths. People are asking for these modular bodies. And so this is like something that could, potentially be enabled by Forma, if I'm not mistaken, where you have, you start with something, but imagine you're a character in a game or something, and you can kind of level up your persona, and it kind of all continuously happens on chain in that way. And that's by having that metadata on chain. Whereas currently, from what I understand, if the provider of some of the NFT marketplaces now doesn't pay, like, for example, their AWS bill, or as you said, if the IPFS goes down, then you lose the JPEG itself. So there's like an active immutability here, but then also a part of it is like this dynamic ability to change, improve, upgrade. Is that kind of like the right train of thought, guys? Josh, Frank, or is there kind of more to it?
No, yeah, I think that's like a good way to think about it. That's a good train of thought. Like, there's going to be more use cases, but those are some obvious ones and early ones. Like, basically, I don't know what I'm going to say here with dynamic NFTs, modular NFTs. Like, maybe that's a new term, modular NFTs. Basically, we're taking NFTs and turning them into base building blocks that people can put together in various ways. And so that can be one NFT, like you're saying, you have your NFT, and then you can change pieces of it around, but it can be also a bigger experiment where it's all of these NFTs, and because all of their metadata is on chain and it's in a composable way, somebody else can come along and now use all of those in their project in some new and interesting way that nobody's kind of ever seen before. And so we're a lot about experimentation and what can we do with NFTs? How can we push them further? How can they be more dynamic? What can we make dynamic? How can they interact with each other? How can people interact with them, right? They shouldn't just be these receipts to JPEGs, which that has value and has what brought us to this point. But how can we push further and make NFTs these art pieces that people can interact with and experience.
And Frank, I think you might have had something to add there as well.
Yeah, I think Josh did a great job of describing it. I mean, just think of how fun that will be from a collector's perspective, right? The item you own is truly owned by you the more we move things on chain. So, you interact with that item, it can literally grow on chain. So that's what's got me excited. As I mentioned before, I'm not an artist, but I'm a collector. And what gets me most excited is moving things on chain and actually having that digital ownership of items. And that's something we need to move towards, and it needs to happen now. So that's what we're trying to do.
Fuel achieves higher throughput by utilizing a novel UTXO-based approach that allows for parallelized execution. This design significantly accelerates transaction processing, which enables Fuel to handle vastly more transactions than non-parallelized systems. Thanks to advancements introduced by Fuel, Ethereum rollups are set to be more powerful than ever before. And Fuel is not just enhancing Ethereum rollups, it's redefining them, making them faster, more scalable, and more adaptable to meet the needs of modern applications and developers. Go to fuel.network, that's fuel.network, to learn how to build on the Rollup OS. Is there an appetite like in the card collecting, whether it's like Pokemon cards or it's sports trading cards? What's the current approach and like perception of on-chain collectibles? Because we see some like tension in gaming, right? Where like some of the gamers don't want on-chain, they don't want financialization of their games, and so there's some tension between like kind of the Web 2 gaming world and the Web 3 gaming world. Is there a similar sort of like relationship between like trading cards and traditionally off-chain collectibles and on-chain, or yeah, like what is kind of the vibe and the sentiment of the trading card community when it comes to on-chain collectibles?
I'm hesitant to answer that, to be honest with you, just for the fact that it's hard to answer that based off of what everybody else is thinking, because I don't think it's been done well yet. To be honest with you, I think that's the biggest problem, right? Like when you think of owning that card, like you said, it's just a receipt to where that JPEG lives. I think that's probably the biggest problem. Once you fully bring ownership to that item and you actually own it, you can move it around to multiple marketplaces. You can trade it, you can swap it, you can play it in the game, whatever you want to do. I think that's going to be when it really explodes in popularity. And right now it's not that. Like there's an example like Panini is a baseball product and they have blockchain cards, but you don't own that, right? If Panini turns their servers off, it's gone. So it really hurts the value of assets there. So, but yeah, I just think the process needs to be improved, to be honest with you, before it can grow to the next level.
Still early.
Yep.
Yeah, that's been the broader sentiment, I think, across the board. I mean, yeah, there's definitely been some sort of like clash, but I think it's generally just like it's still early in this idea of digital asset ownership on chain, which I think it takes people some time to come around to. And so, we'll kind of see that. And you guys are still early with Forma and are pushing forward this artist initiative as well to kind of onboard new creators. And it's termed Modularium or Modularium. Perhaps I'm butchering that. I would love to learn how you guys came up with that. I'm generally getting this vibe like, all right, we're pushing towards modular art. So what is Modularium and kind of where does this take us next?
So Modularium is an initiative of basically, on a very high level, you can think of it as what do the early innings of what Celestia looks like, right, as block space. What does it look like? Because so far it's been mostly plumbing and architecture and sort of abstracted notions of technology. And what is amazing about art and in general the history of art is that artists are the best dreamers of taking new technology and visualizing it in ways that actually evokes emotional responses to it, right? Like that's fundamentally one of the main ways that art historically sort of progresses, right? And for Modularium, we sort of approached a set of artists that are at the same time crypto native, so they understand deeply the technical infrastructure that grows, from which on-chain creations emerge, but are also daring and adventurous and are willing to plant the flag on like brand new affordances in block space with Forma. And so we have a set of, I think, some of the most inspiring artists in the space right now. I can't really reveal their names because like part of the initiative as well is the slow, and surprising release of each of these pieces, most of which are open editions at a very sort of affordable price between 0.1 to 1 TIA, so that it doesn't start from a place of sort of abject speculation, but it's more of a sort of collecting, of brand new things, and all of them sort of interested in using new affordances to imagine new ways of creativity as well, right? So a lot of them either at the beginning or later down the line with future plans are sort of using the on-chain metadata sort of that Forma is built around in very interesting ways. The first one is a piece by Nick Hamilton, which is, in my opinion, one of the more interesting visualizations of like what it looks like for something to be a digital object. Is like this. It really straddles the line between something that looks physical but is purely digital, and I really sort of like that. It is one of the if not the first, one of the first sort of NFTs on that sort of will permeate throughout the Celestia block space. So the idea there was again to have a curated set of really boundary pushing artists in a very affordable way that sort of gets to define and plant the flag on sort of, again, like the Celestia block space as a creative tool and as a medium and as a canvas rather than just as a technological solution.
And so all these mints are going to be happening on Forma, on the sovereign rollup Forma?
Yeah, all of the mints on Modularium are going to be on Forma.
And then the gas token for Forma is TIA, and then users will be minting these NFTs in, like you said, 0.1 to 1 TIA. So like this kind of makes Celestia much more of like a longer term provenance based, almost, you could almost see like luxury-esque or like long-term oriented like collector chain, kind of like some of like the OG ETH NFT pieces, like some of like the art blocks. This is kind of giving me like art blocks vibes. And then you guys are kind of curating your own list of artists, and you've got this like kind of curational arm, Aura, which I'm sure you can tell us more about. But it seems there's like this curation of like long-term collector mentality based on like, I like the art versus like, I want to make money on this kind of persona.
Well, I just feel like the real pushing of boundaries when it comes to NFTs and crypto art is how do we move on and forward from like, just capturing a JPEG on chain to firstly, as I said, like utilizing new technical affordances for new ways of distributing and creating sort of on-chain creations. And secondly, and importantly, I think, it's really important to be able to highlight these things and augment and support things that are very tasteful and take it very seriously what creativity is, because it's not just necessarily visualizing something. It's more about the sort of thought process that comes, and there's like such an intriguing history both with art blocks and like autoglyphs and early sort of super rare creations on Ethereum. There's such a deep legacy of extremely thought-provoking and innovative creativity on Ethereum, as well as we're seeing some really cool things with ordinals. And Aura is a sort of it's a prism, so to speak, on the emerging creativity on Celestia as well. So it's a way, an attempt to highlight, support, and incubate and cultivate tasteful, interesting experiments around creativity, both in the form of NFTs and in the future. Sort of, there's many interesting things happening on this notion of art chains, which are like chains themselves that act as artworks or as artist ateliers. So artist block chains, which we'll hopefully talk a bit more about in the future, as a lot of these things are currently being worked by some, again, really cool artists. But yeah, fundamentally, we want to sort of augment and highlight these things and really showcase the amazing depth of creativity that's happening on the blockchain that's many times, I think, gets pushed aside or sort of, with noise that of more things that are not really, necessarily trying to push the boundary forward. So Aura is intended that, and Celestia, I think the Celestia community, I do think like has an opportunity to create some really cool things given the blank slate of the chain itself, right? Like it's a brand new block space in some ways, and therefore the potential for it to become the sort of powerhouse of creativity, I think is there, and we really want to highlight and support innovation there above and beyond sort of just tokenizing things, more about pushing the boundary forward.
Frank or Josh, anything to add there? Cool. It seems like if you're bullish Celestia and the idea of modularity long term, some of these pieces on Forma, could be the next autoglyphs or kind of art blocks, etc., or the own version of them here. And very excited to see some of these mints. I'm sure our community will be actively participating. I'm not sure if these mints are going to be more, like I said, open edition, or if they're going to be kind of limited, or how you guys plan on kind of going about those with each artist. But that'll be quite interesting. And I think a whole other avenue is actually artists getting paid from this when they previously wouldn't be able to, right? And so like getting this access of all these collectors on chain is something that I think artists will be extremely appreciative of.
Yeah, many of the mints will be open editions because Celestia is sort of blockchain of abundance, and we also believe that the early thing should also be abundant, right? And hence also like affordable. So that's quite important. that they can permeate across their wallets, and again, like visualize the sort of early aesthetic identity of Forma and Celestia more broadly.
I've got a more technical question, I think, because like part of the advantage and the specialty of Forma is going to be creating this dynamic nature to these NFTs. But also the fact that Forma is a sovereign rollup. And so what we've seen in sovereignty, modularity, is that it creates this fragmentation problem. And there's a lot of projects out there that are solving this via interoperability. Different solutions are out there without kind of getting into those. I'm curious, how is Forma going to bring in like some data, some like the state of some other blockchains out there in order to impact these NFTs and kind of like the on-chain creations on Forma? How will you go about doing sort like interoperability and composability with NFTs that may be on other chains? Is there some sort of functionality that you guys have in the works that could potentially connect chains or connect NFTs from multiple chains together and create like a more expressive and creative world that's made up of all these different chains?
Certainly exploring and interested in, looking into, we're looking into exploring, state proofs from other systems, stuff like that. We're looking at various bridging solutions. We're looking at various ways to even just like make it easier to pay from like other ecosystems. So like you want to buy this thing on Forma, but like your money is over on this other chain, but you can pay on that chain and get it on Forma, like that kind of stuff. So like these are all like areas that we're like highly interested in, and we're definitely like researching and exploring like the best ways to bring all that stuff to Forma.
Yeah, I mean, I was quite interested about how we're going to kind of bring the IP of other collections too. I'm a big Pudgy Penguin guy, Celestine Sloth guy, and it'd be cool to see some of my NFTs come and, play around on Forma, or, have the ability to at least like be like, hey, I can verify that I have ownership there and different things. And obviously those are like EVM based or Stargaze or kind of other chains. So, Forma being the first sovereign rollup, it's a bit different. And I kind of want to double click on that choice. You guys could have chosen a ton of different ways to launch this chain, but you guys have established a sovereign rollup with TIA as the gas token, which notably is only 4 to 6 months old as a token itself. I'm curious about kind of that choice and kind of what the ramifications are of using Celestia TIA as your gas and kind of commodity token, if you will, on chain for all transactions.
Yeah, I'll jump in there. So first, data availability, is paid in TIA. So it just makes sense for TX fees to also be paid in TIA. And second is from a product standpoint, it really just makes sense. There's 600K or 600,000 plus wallets with TIA. There's a whole community out there that wants to create and collect on an ecosystem that is Celestia native. So that's pretty big from a product standpoint. But also there has to be some native currency for the culture around modular and Celestia and the Celestia ecosystem. And we plan for that to be Forma. And we want Forma to be the chain for on-chain creations on Celestia, right? So once again, that only makes sense that it's TIA. And communities also tend to form around like a common unit of exchange and store value. And we think this is going to also help jumpstart Celestia's cultural ecosystem with utilizing TIA. So
it's a bit of an alignment thing, and maybe this is too much alpha, but the sloths were offered to the stakers of TIA, and there's been kind of some backlash. People are like, oh, TIA's down from the highs. Oh, there hasn't been airdrops and all these different things. But sloths happened, and they did very well. Now, I'm curious, with Forma, is there any potential for alignment where if you've been staking TIA or if you have done these actions in the ecosystem, you might be lined up for other opportunities which non-stakers may not? Or kind of what is the extent of the alignment with the TIA community and the TIA holders and stakers?
This is currently, there are no plans at this time currently. And it's just because, to be honest, we've been heads down building, trying to get Forma out the gate. Now, does that mean that won't happen in the future? I'm not going to say that, right? But at this moment right now, there's no plans on it because we got to focus on Forma and building it out and building the community first.
I think it could be cool to see like mints for stake TIA holders, or just other cool perks to kind of show the community alignment. So
I think it's a great idea, and it's something that we definitely need to talk more about as a team internally.
Welcome aboard on our journey into the singularity. This is the endgame roadmap for Frax and Fraxtal, the new L2 out of the Frax ecosystem that is totally based on fractal scaling. Fraxtal is a modular L2 blockchain built by Frax with modular and fractal scaling in mind. Fractal scaling is based on the Mandelbrot set of fractal images, and it explains how L2s become L3s and the entire app chain lifecycle goes through its evolution. The Frax ecosystem is made of some of the top builders in the space and has stemmed from its OG days of the Frax stablecoin. It is now in the LST space, the LRT space, and this Fraxtal L2 joins the existing suite of Frax products, including Frax Swap and Frax Lend. You can see Frax Ferry, the bridge to go from any chain, Arbitrum, Optimism, or mainnet into the Fraxtal mainnet. Bridge your tokens and bring your Frax assets into the Fraxtal ecosystem. Join today to get the best out of Fraxtal. You are still early. Join today. Take part in our expedition into the singularity.
Okay, so speaking on the sovereign rollup, so we've got T as the gas token, we've got the sovereign rollup for on-chain creations. And Josh, you've spent a lot of time kind of thinking about the optimal design here. Talk us through kind of like what this looks like under the hood a bit more, and kind of why you feel Forma is like effectively purpose-built for these on-chain creations, and what that really means for our developer audience and kind of our more under the hood oriented folk.
Yeah, so purpose built means that like we've gone and like written code to make these things happen basically. So we are EVM compatible. There's a lot of EVM users out there. There's a lot of EVM developers. There's a lot of tooling around working with the EVM. So like that's why we chose that choice, because there's just you want to get people to come and build. There's like a lot of builder tools like built around the EVM, but like we've taken the EVM and like we've like customized it. Then we've added like a lot of custom precompiles, like just to get a little technical stuff like base 64 stuff like compression. So like metadata compresses like very, very well. Like there's no reason to have that like bloat your chain. Stuff like strings. Any Solidity devs are probably cursing at like string manipulation, and a lot of devs and artists who write in Solidity like to do string manipulations to like make their things more dynamic. So like we've added some precompiles to make string management and manipulation more easy. And then just we've added like a general JSON parser that like makes this composability of metadata possible. So like we're starting there with that stuff, but like we're going to expand from there. We're going to have more precompiles as people experiment and stuff. We're definitely going to have that. We're going to probably try to shift, see like what we can generate on chain, like because we're starting with metadata. So like the obvious next thing is, well, let's get like the actual thing itself on chain. And an obvious thing there is to do like generate tokens, right? Like they're basically little like programs, and like we have an execution environment. Let's have the execution environment actually execute the code that is generating the thing that you see. So we're going to explore that. But yeah, out the gate, we're starting with on-chain metadata, custom, precompiles that are in the EVM that make this possible. We've made like a few tweaks to make it a bit more gas efficient, so that you can do more in your code and in the contracts. So yeah, we're very excited to see what people come and build and experiment with.
You mentioned that you're using Astria as the shared sequencer network. Could you talk us what went into that decision? Why did you go with Astria versus some of the other shared sequencers, and why did you go with a shared sequencer to begin with?
Yeah, so again, it's about this idea of what's going to be here for like the long term, right? Like we could have launched with like our own centralized sequencer. That's not, we can't prove that's going to be around like long term. Like if our server shuts down, then like the whole thing shuts down. We could have tried to build like our own consensus network and validator network, but like that's a whole thing. We wanted to focus on our thing. We wanted to focus on our execution environment and like what we're passionate about and good at doing. And so like the obvious answer is like a decentralized shared sequencer network where we get all of those properties that we care about. We inherit them from that network. And there's like, that's also a very new space. There's only like a few players in it, and like Astria for us was the choice to go with.
Cool. As we kind of wrap up, our community is going to hear this and they're going to think immediately of sloths and them hearing about the sloths early and making a 300x or something and now everyone's streaming sloths on Twitter, and the founder of Monad today is tweeting about sloths, and everyone's having fun. So how can our community get involved with you guys on this journey? We have a ton of TIA stakers, a ton of TIA holders, a ton of modular activists, should we say. How can we get involved for what's to come in the coming weeks and months, and what is to come?
So yeah, I'll touch on that. So of course we got Modularium coming up, and that's going to be going on for several weeks. But the thing that's going to be coming up afterwards is we're going to be building out our permissionless marketplace called ubiquity.art. So this is currently being designed and built out, and will be, like I said, launched after Modularium. From there, we have things that we're going to be doing like on-chain generation, cross-minting, seamless bridging. We've already built a bridge. I'm actually extremely proud of the bridge that we built. We've had a lot of feedback on it to make sure that process is as simple as it can be and as quickly. And it is very extremely quick bridge. And then other than that, adding more pre-compiles, right, to the chain. So, and maybe maybe there's going to be some third-party marketplaces coming and joining and integrating. But other than that, there's going to be a lot of integration and a lot of cool projects coming to Forma in the future. So definitely stay tuned and follow us on Twitter and Discord.
Yeah, guys, thank you so much for coming on and sharing. It's been a pleasure, and wishing you guys the best. And I can't wait to mint out as many pieces of art and join the Forma revolution and the good vibes that come with being in some of the early art and kind of provenance of Celestia. So great work, guys, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.